Welcome to Martian Mixed Martial Arts.
Wow. Wouldn't it be crazy if the aliens like manufactured you to be a mixed martial arts fighter? They're like, let's see if we could just turn this
I'm
dude
sure
into a bad
I'm sure
motherfucker."
if it would have happened, I would have been much better than this.
Much better than this. You're the fucking champion. What are you talking
Yeah,
about?
but if I would be alien manufacturer, I would be Superman.
What is up, ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, aliens, Martians, any conscious being tuning into the podcast? I welcome you to episode 38 of Martian Mixed Martial Arts. This week we will be previewing the UFC pay-per-view going down this Saturday night, UFC 230, headlined by Daniel Cormier versus Derek Lewis for the UFC Heavyweight Championship. This card will take place in Madison Square Garden in New York City. If you were tuning into the podcast to listen to the guest portion of the podcast with my man Gary, who came on to talk about the main card of UFC 230 and to talk of all things jiu-jitsu, then you can fast forward to the 23-minute and 45-second mark. It was great getting to talk to Gary. Really insightful conversation we had. One of the two podcasts I've done in person where the person was sitting right next to me recording it. So it's actually pretty easy to have some good chemistry and get a good conversation going. So that might be a format I'd be looking at exploring more of in the future. But for now, we are going to be talking about the prelims on the UFC 230. Analyzing and predicting every single fight on the card, also giving some insight on the betting aspects of this card. All of the lines have been out for now, or for a good bit now, and got a pretty good sense of what's got some value on it. So I will share my predictions of the fights, and I'll also share my suggestions for the betting column. So we're going to start things off in the heavyweight division. We have Adam Wojciechowski, who is 10-1, taking on Marcus Rogerio de Lima, who is 15-5-1. Now the betting aspect of this one, we have Marcus Rogerio opening up plus 260, Adam Wojciechowski opening minus 320. The line has been bet down in Rogerio's favor. He is now a plus 185 underdog to Wojciechowski at minus 225. So a lot of action coming in on Marcus Rogerio de Lima, and rightfully so, man. I think that is the right play to make in this one. Not only am I going to pick him to win, I fully encourage a bet on this gentleman. He does have some mental lapses in the octagon. He does shoot for takedowns at the wrong times and, maybe get submitted, which is going to be the way that he loses this fight if he does lose it. But I like the odds. I like his chances. I think that if this fight stays on the feet, then Marcus Rogerio has a good chance at knocking out Adam Wojciechowski. We saw Wojciechowski have some trouble with Arjun Buehler on the feet in his last fight, was losing that fight pretty decisively, and was also getting taken down before he got a submission off his back. So not really an offensive wrestler that can threaten Rogerio with a takedown, I imagine, and not really too good of a striker. So this line is really confusing, and I'm going to pick Rogerio to get the win, probably a knockout around the second round. The next fight we have in the 135 bantamweight division, we have Brian Kelleher, who is 19-9, taking on Montel Jackson, who is 6-1. Now the betting lines opened up in this one. Montel Jackson minus 150, Brian Kelleher at plus 130. Now looking over at 5 dimes, we have Montel Jackson minus 135, Brian Kelleher plus 115. So a little bit of action coming in on Kelleher's way. This fight does have some two-way action. It's going all over the place. People betting both sides, and rightfully so. I think it's a close matchup in this one. It's both of these guys are, their best aspects are striking. They're both pretty powerful punchers. Montel Jackson had a little bit of a disappointing debut in his UFC debut. People were riding high on him coming into that fight. 6-0, coming off of a win on the Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series. A third-round knockout in that fight. Showed good cardio, good power. Really was a promising fight for him. And then, unfortunately, he ran into a brick wall. That is Ricky Simon in his first fight. Or Ricky Simone, excuse me. There's an accent over the O. So, that the dude's just a tenacious wrestler, and he took Jackson down and beat him that way. But I do not think that Brian Kelleher will implement a wrestling game plan. He really hasn't done that so far in the UFC. He's got a bit of experience too. He's got some nice wins. Win over Renan Barão, Damian Stacek, Yuri Alcantara, and dropping a couple fights to Marlon Vera and John Lineker. He also has a win over Julio Arce. 2 wins over Julio Arce. Wins over Andre Sukumtat. The dude has been, Brian Kelleher has been fighting the best of the best in the regionals. I just mentioned 3 wins over legitimate UFC contenders right now. And, so I believe that Kelleher is the better experienced fighter. If I had to lean one way, I think I would go with Kelleher. I think this is going to be a brawl. It's going to be, a lot of punches, and I think that Kelleher has more experience in that aspect, and he will come out victorious. We haven't seen Montel's chin tested too much, but I think we're definitely going to see it in this fight, and it better be good because he's going to need it to withstand those Kelleher shots. So I'm going to pick Kelleher to get this one done, either a decision or possibly a third-round knockout. Next fight in the 145 featherweight division, we have Shane Burgos, who is 10-1, taking on Kurt Hollebach, who is 17-5. Kurt Hollebach opened up at a plus 250 underdog, and Shane Burgos opened at a minus 300 favorite. Right now, the line stands at minus 320 Shane Burgos, plus 260 for Kurt Hollebach. It's interesting that this line is so wide. I mean, Kurt Hollebach throws heat. So does Shane Burgos. Again, like this past matchup, both these guys, I think their best aspect are their punches. They're both pretty strong boxers. I would say that Shane Burgos probably has the more overall better MMA game. I think that he really hasn't gotten to show how good he is in the UFC yet. I mean, he does have a few nice wins over Charles Rosa and Giudafi Pepe, but Shane Burgos did lose his last fight via knockout to Calvin Kattar in the 3rd round. He took a 10-month layoff for that, and I assume fixed up any holes in his game, and he's going to be back an even better fighter. Kurt Hollebach, on the other hand, also had a pretty exciting fight with Heoni Barcelos in his last fight. He lost that fight via knockout in the 3rd round, unfortunately. Just a vicious knockout that he suffered in that one. His chin was holding pretty strong in that one. He was eating some strong punches from Barcelos. Really, you don't see guys hitting that hard at 145 too often. But Kurt Hollebach is a legitimate guy. He has that nice win over Matt Bessette on the Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series that was overturned because he used an IV. Oh boy, an IV. Get that guy off the roster. I think this is going to be a good fight. I think the line is a little bit wide now. I think it's going to be closer than what the line depicts at plus 260 for Kurt Hollebach. But I'm going to pick Burgos to get this one done, and I think that he does have a good chance at testing that chin of Hollebach and knocking him out in possibly the 2nd or 3rd round. In the next fight, we have in the 155-pound lightweight division, Matt Steamroll Frivola, who is 6-1, taking on Lando Venata, who is 9-3-1. The betting lines open up in this one. Lando Venata minus 300 favorite to Matt Frivola at plus 250. Lando Venata is now minus 265, and Frivola is down to plus 225. So a little bit of action coming in on Frivola's way. Man, I don't agree with this. I looked at this line earlier and I thought, man, Frivola, I think he got as high as plus 265 earlier. I thought there was a lot of value on Frivola. Venata hasn't really had too much success lately. He has some tough fights. He ran into Drakkar Klose, and then David Tamer as well. Tony Ferguson, he has not had an easy run in the UFC at all. And his only win is against John Makdessi, who's a pretty legitimate striker. So I think that this fight is going to favor Lando Venata, but he better be ready to throw heat, because Frevola comes forward throwing bombs right away. He eats a lot of shots. Like, he ate a lot of shots in his knockout loss to Marco Polo Reyes in his last fight. Man, just got pretty brutally knocked out in that one. So that was it was pretty shocking to see that his chin didn't hold up at all. It only lasted 1 minute, and he was rocked in maybe the first 15 seconds of that one too. So if Venata is ready to come out there and throw heat, then I think that Venata will get this one done. If Venata tries to, use like a kickboxing style and win on points, it might be a close fight, because I think that Frevola could, throw some bombs and land on the chin of Venata a little bit and make this fight close. So the pick is going to be Venata, but the line right now is still, I would say, a little bit wide. In the next fight, in the 170-pound welterweight division, we have Lyman Good, who is 19-4, taking on Ben Saunders, who is 22-10-2. We have the betting site has Sultan Aliyev versus Lyman Good right now, even though Sultan Aliyev was replaced a little while ago due to an injury. We will get that updated line for you right now. Right now we have Lyman Good opened up at -273. I don't know what that's about. Ben Saunders at +217, and right now Lyman Good is sitting at -700 to Ben Saunders at +500. Another fight where I think the line is wide. I think that Lyman Good should be the favorite, maybe -300 or 400, but -700, man. The juice era is real. I don't know if I would bet on Ben Saunders' money line. I think Ben Saunders' best chance of getting this fight done would be by submission. I think that Lyman Good is a pretty good striker. He had a pretty close fight with Zaleski dos Santos. Was it Zaleski dos Santos in his last fight? Or was it one of these other Brazilian motherfuckers? Pretty sure it was Zaleski dos Santos. Yes, it was. He had a very close split decision loss to him in his last fight. That fight was, really razor thin. Those guys look identical, honestly, and they were just, throwing a high output kickboxing match in that fight. Hard to score that one. I think that that's how Lyman Good is going to win this fight. He's going to keep it on the feet, and he's going to butcher Saunders on the feet, possibly get a finish. Saunders' striking isn't too bad. His wrestling isn't that great, and his jiu-jitsu is pretty good. So I think that if Saunders gets this fight done, it'll be by submission. I bet on the submission line earlier for Saunders. It was just so wide. It's still wide, +1335. Like, the dude has a slight chance to win this fight, and if he does it at all, I think it will be by that submission. So +1335 is honestly a great stab at this fight, because where the money line stands, it's very, very wide right now. So I think I would advise maybe going on a prop. I think that Lyman Good by knockout is -187. It's not like he's shown any crazy power in the UFC yet, right? I mean, dude has, I'm sure, a lot of regional knockouts, but I don't think that he has any knockouts in the UFC. Actually, he does. He has one over Andrew Craig. He's 1-1 in the UFC. He has a good amount of regional experience too. He fought in Bellator. He fought a lot of good guys in Bellator. So Lyman Good, I think, will win this fight. But again, betting the lines on this one are wide. The next fight takes place in the 145-pound featherweight division, as Julio Arce, who is 15-2, is taking on Shaman Moraes, who is 10-2. The betting lines for this one, we have Shaman Moraes opening up at +300 to Julio Arce at -360. Shaman Moraes is now +280, while Julio Arce is -340. So a little bit of action coming in on Moraes' way. I'm sure there's two-way action on this fight. I'm sure people are trusting Julio Arce as a -300 favorite, because the dude is certainly legit. He has showed some slick striking in his UFC tenure so far. I believe he is undefeated in the UFC. Shaman Moraes, is no bum either. He's a very, very good fighter. He's fought some stiff competition so far, man. He fought Zabit Magomed Sharapov in his first fight, who, as we all know, is one of the best 145-pound fighters on the roster, certainly one of the best prospects. And he lasted with Zabit almost till the bell in that one. Around 14 minutes and 30 seconds into the fight, he was tapped out with an anaconda choke. And he also beat Matt Sales in his last fight. Shane Moraes did. He won the first round, 2 rounds of that fight, and then his cardio seemed to fall off a little bit, and Sales won the third. So it was a clear 2-1 for Moraes. Julio Arce's cardio has looked good. He's just looked really, really impressive in there. He's beaten Daniel Tamer, Dan Ige, and also has a win over Peter Pettis in the Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series. He was a Ring of Combat champion, which is a very legitimate promotion on the East Coast. And as I mentioned, he has 2 losses to another fighter fighting on this card, Brian Kelleher. Those are his only 2 losses in his career, so no shame in those losses there. This is going to be a great fight. I think that Julio Arce will come out victorious in this one. I think that he's just going to be the more consistent, more accurate striker in this one. If Moraes can try to change levels, I think this one will get interesting. But Arce has pretty good takedown defense, and I think that this one will be contested on the feet. It could be close in the first 2 rounds, but I think in the 3rd round, Arce will probably run away with it and win a decision or possibly get a late knockout. The next fight takes place in the women's 125-pound flyweight division. We have Sijara Eubanks, who is 3-2, versus Roxanne Modaffari, who is 22-14. The betting lines opened up in this one. Roxanne Modaffari at plus 360 and Sijara Eubanks at minus 450. Sijara Eubanks has been bet down to minus 600, while Roxanne Modaffari is up to plus 450. So people are trusting Eubanks all the way down to a 6-1 favorite in this one. I think it's a very favorable matchup for her. It's a damn shame that Sijara Eubanks was put in this bit of a, I guess you could call it a controversy with this UFC 230 main event. If you are unaware, she was briefly linked to a bout with Valentina Shevchenko leading up to this one, and there was outrage over this. Outrage, I want to say. After the past 2 Madison Square Garden shows have been headlined by George St. Pierre and Conor McGregor, you can't have the next one be headlined by Sijara Eubanks, a 3-2 fighter who has missed weight at 125 pounds before. It's just, you can't do that. So luckily the UFC removed that fight. They decided. I don't think it was ever concrete. I think there were just strong speculation and strong rumors about it. I mean, it was very, very widely known that was going to be the main event for a few days, and then all of a sudden they flipped it back. So they got Sijara Eubanks this matchup with Roxanne Modaffari in this card, but it's a damn shame they did that injustice to this girl, because she can fight, man. She has good pressure. She has that's what aggression, man. She goes in there and looking like she wants to win and she wants to do damage. And I like girls who fight like that. There aren't enough of them, and you got to get mean in that cage. And I think a lot of girls unfortunately lack that aggression to really knock some bitches out or tap some bitches out. But Eubanks definitely has that. Roxanne Modaffari is no slouch either. She's been fighting for decades. She's probably has some of the most fights out of any woman on the roster in 36 professional MMA fights. That's just almost unheard of for women's MMA. She's a real pioneer. She got a great win in her last fight, a TKO with some elbows over Barb Honchak. She was struggling earlier in her UFC career. Well, that was her first UFC fight technically, because she was on the The Ultimate Fighter, excuse me. Actually, she did have an official UFC fight against Nico Montano. What happened was Sijara Eubanks missed weight for her fight with Nico Montano, and then Roxanne Modaffari filled in on a one day's notice, and then she stepped up to fight 5 rounds. She went the full 5 rounds and lost that fight. But Roxanne Modaffari is no she ain't no bitch, basically, is what I'm trying to say. You know, she wasn't scared that she had to take a fight that was 10 minutes longer with a different girl on one day's notice. She just wanted that crack at the title. I should mention that these two women have already fought before on the Ultimate Fighter, and Sijara Eubanks did win that fight, so that's probably why she's such a big favorite in this one. I see that that's how this fight again goes. It will be Sijara Eubanks getting the W, and I think this one will end up going to the scorecards. In the next fight, we have Jason Knight, who is 20-5, taking on Jordan Rinaldi, who is 13-6. This fight is taking place in the 145-pound featherweight division, and the betting odds opened in this one. Jordan Rinaldi at plus 220, Jason Knight at minus 260. The line is currently exactly the same, and it seems like action is coming in on Rinaldi's way, with 59% of wagers being placed on him. This is a dog or pass fight. No doubt about it. Jason Knight is a fading fighter. He has some good submissions. He used to, he had a good run in the UFC, but it seems like that time is over, and he just doesn't have that fire anymore. He's lost 3 fights in a row. I believe 2 of them were knockouts. I could be wrong. I definitely was knocked out by Ricardo Lamas, and then I believe he might have just got his face butchered against. Who is that gentleman? Gabriel Benitez. Yeah, Gabriel Benitez beat him pretty bad. And Ricardo Lamas did knock him out. Makwan Amerikami also beat him by split decision only a few months ago, back in May. That was a pretty close fight, but Makwan is just a great wrestler and was able to take Jason down and beat him that way with just pressure and top control. Jordan Rinaldi, though, is not very good either. It's I would say this, I would say stay away from this one, even though it's dog or pass. Even though I think that the traditionally almost any warm body in there against Jason Knight at a 2-1 underdog should be a decent bet. But man, Rinaldi is just not UFC caliber. They're giving him, they're throwing him a bone, giving him this one more fight. He has fought some pretty stiff competition. Abel Trujillo and Gregor Gillespie, both losing to them. He also has one win over Alvo Herrera by Von Flucho, which just, that guy, Alvo Herrera, stinks. Especially to get submitted by him. Gregor Gillespie just took Rinaldi down and was just able to beat him bad, so it's kind of got a hard sense to get a good feel for how good Rinaldi is, but you just don't get good vibes watching him. He does have a good amount of regional experience. I did not watch those fights, so I can't fully endorse him. He does have 5 or 6 losses in the regional circuit, though. It's pretty legit guys, though. Brian Ortega and Joe Proctor. So, Rinaldi is not a total bum, but I just don't think that either of these guys are up to UFC caliber anymore. So, if I had to lean one way, oh man, it's gonna be hard. I guess Rinaldi. So if take that as you will, because he is a 2-1 underdog, but still have no interest in betting this fight. This will be a fight where you cook dinner before the main card, or you quick run out and grab a coffee or something before the main card. But it's a damn shame this fight is the headliner on the prelims to one of the biggest pay-per-views of the year, or at least it should be one of the biggest pay-per-views of the year. So. That is going to be all for the prelims, and we're going to be tuning in with Gary to talk about the UFC 230 main card and have some jiu-jitsu talk at the end. So I hope you guys enjoyed this solo rendition of the podcast, and now we're going to be joined by Gary. All right, we are back on Martian MMA with the main card portion of UFC 230. With me to preview these 5 fights, I have my friend Gary with me. Say what's up, man.
What's going on, everybody?
Gary is one of my jiu-jitsu coaches at Balance Studios in Philadelphia, and we just finished up a class that he taught, and he was interested in being on the podcast, so we linked up, and we're going to talk about the pay-per-view card that is going down this Saturday night from Madison Square Garden in New York City. We've been used to some pretty stellar cards in New York City. The UFC 205 and UFC 217 both had 3 title fights on them, and as you know, they were very remarkable cards that went down in history, but this year we're kind of left with a bit of an underwhelming card. It was plagued by injuries, but nonetheless, the 5 main card fights are still some pretty good matchups, and we're going to be talking about them first. And so the first fight on the main card, we have Israel Adesanya taking on Derek Brunson. Israel Adesanya opened up at -320, and he is currently sitting. He opened up at a different odds that I don't have up right now. He's currently sitting at -320. Fuck. Damn, they all went away. I can still get them up. Let's see. So Israel Adesanya is currently at -320. Derek Brunson is at +260. Israel Adesanya being the big favorite in this one. What are your thoughts on this matchup, Gary?
I think Israel, I like a lot of his, I like how he talks on the mic. I think he's very confident in a lot of his fights. I feel Derek Brunson comes in pretty explosive, pretty fast, and he's got that high level. Israel's got that high level kickboxing, and I don't think it's a very good matchup for Derek Brunson. I see Israel being a potential belt holder in the future. Maybe if the weight classes change, if the 65 edition or 75 edition, maybe he goes down to 75. But right now, I feel pretty confident that he's going to beat Brunson this Saturday.
Yeah, Israel just keeps shocking me, man. He's coming from that glory kickboxing background. He's been kickboxing his whole life, and he's making this transition to MMA better than a lot of the one-dimensional fighters that we've seen transition. He seems to have his takedown defense on point, and I can't stress enough how genius he is for racking up 11 or 12 fights outside of the UFC, getting his takedown defense on point, and then transitioning to the UFC. A lot of guys, they have a couple fights under their belt, and then they transition to the UFC, and then their skill level is way behind par. Mackenzie Dern's a perfect example, world-class jiu-jitsu. Couple fights under her belt, and then she's brought over to the UFC, and she still kind of is really raw. But Israel Adesanya just really, really smart move on his coaching, on his coaches, on his personal behalf, for getting that takedown defense on point. He's fought a few wrestlers so far. Marvin Vettori, not really too good. Mike Wilkinson, not too good. But he fought Brad Tavares last fight in a tough fight. A lot of people thought that Tavares could pull off the upset in that one, but Israel Adesanya, his cardio held up, and he won in a decisive decision all 5 rounds. So. I think that Israel Adesanya will win this one by decision. I see a lot of people favoriting Israel Adesanya by knockout, but I just don't think he has that KO power. I mean, he does have 12 of his 14 wins by knockout. But keep in mind, that's over way lower level competition. He has knocked out a few guys with good chins, but I think that he'll know that Brunson has that KO power. He knows that he'll be aggressive, and he'll be confident to just jab and teep and kick his way to a decision in this one. But great fight to kick off the main card.
Totally.
Next fight on the main card, we have probably one of the worst fights on the card, unfortunately. Jack Marshman taking on Carl Robertson. The odds for this one, we had Carl Robertson open up at +145 and Jack Marshman at -185. The lines have totally flipped in this one. Carl Robertson going to the favorite at -280. Jack Marshman up to +240. So people who got on the Carl Robertson as an underdog, congratulations to you. I think he has a pretty favorable matchup in this one. Carl Robertson is a muscular striker. He's just a gifted athlete, while Marshman is kind of a chubbier, a chinny boxer, and both of their ground games I think could use a little bit of work. We've seen both of them lose on the ground recently. Most recently, Carl Robertson took on Cesar Ferreira and was taken down and just submitted very, very easily in that fight. So both of their ground games are pretty weak, and I imagine this one will stay on the feet and there will be a knockout quickly in this one. What are you thinking about this one?
To be honest with you, I really don't know too much about these guys. I'm surprised they got to the main event slot in a guarding card. But good for them.
Yeah, no shame on that. I mean, they've been on undercards, and like you said, it's when we've been thinking about some of the fights that have been the second fights on the main card. We had Yoel Romero versus Chris Weidman at UFC 205. And I don't remember who we had at UFC 217, but just really dropping the ball having these guys on the main card. I think that there's even some better fights on the the prelims that could that you could use have Julio Arce on there or Sajara Eubanks, one of these people who is a potential contender. You can start getting them some exposure. But two guys who their ceilings I think are kind of low in the UFC. It's a damn shame they're on the main card. So I'll pick Robertson to get the W in this one, but not looking forward to too much. Next fight on the main card, we had a matchup that was a little bit plagued by injury in this one. We have David Branch taking on Jared Cannonier. David Branch opened up at minus 300 in this one, Jared Cannonier at plus 220, and people are still betting David Branch down to minus 370, while Cannonier is up to plus 310. So this matchup was supposed to be David Branch versus Jacare Souza, which would have just been an amazing fight. David Branch was calling to fight Jacare. He wanted that matchup. He was making call outs on Instagram. He actually ordered some alligator meat to his house in an effort to make a funny video pursuing Jacare to that matchup. But unfortunately, it gets taken away from him. Just a real bummer. He had that fight earlier this year against Yoel Romero lined up too, and that fight was scrapped too. So tough year for David Branch. What are you thinking about the matchup in Branch versus Cannonier?
So I think David Branch is a high-level black belt. He's very explosive. He had a great career in other organizations, the World Series of Fighting. And Jared is coming off 2 losses. I think David Branch, is just a high-level guy, and I'm not 100% sure if he's ready for that kind of skill level yet. He's a black belt under Renzo Gracie, explosive striker. He did have a loss to Luke Rockhold, but I believe he was winning most of that fight up until the end. David Branch is a legit top contender, and I think I'll take the W for sure in this one.
Yeah, you mentioned Luke Rockhold. That is who was supposed to be in the co-main event of this fight card. I bet you David Branch hates Luke Rockhold because Luke Rockhold was the reason why Whitaker got hurt in his first fight. That's why he got his Romero fight pulled. Now Rockhold gets hurt and he gets his Jacare fight pulled. So I bet you he's pretty bitter towards Rockhold, considering he also, I believe, TKO'd him. I think he, like you said, David Branch was winning the fight on the feet. And then, like you said, he's a black belt, but it just goes to show how good Luke Rockhold's ground game is, that he was able to control a black belt and just dominate him for the TKO in that one. But I imagine this is, like you said, too big of a step up for Cannonier in this one. He is a pretty game fighter, but I think that Branch is just better in all aspects. I expect this one to be contested a lot on the feet, and Cannonier coming in on short notice. I hope his cardio is good because he's going to need it to survive to the decision in this one. But I think Branch will probably get the finish. And in the co-main event, we have Chris Weidman taking on Jacare Souza. Chris Weidman opened up minus 125 to Jacare at minus 105. People are betting down Chris Weidman pretty significantly, surprisingly. He's down to minus 190, while Jacare is up to plus 165. Man, I think Jacare, as that big of an underdog, might be one of my favorite bets of the card. I do favor Jacare in this matchup. I think this fight, it will end up going to the decision. I think it'll be a close, awesome fight. But I think that Jacare, we just saw Jacare eat some of Kelvin Gastelum's best punches. We saw him knock out Derek Brunson earlier in the year with some head kicks, and his striking looked powerful. So whenever you think Jacare has done after he got knocked out by Whitaker, he comes back and he's still very, very game. Same with Chris Weidman. After he suffered a few losses, he had that fight with Mousasi. It was, I believe, I think they called it a TKO from Mousasi, but it was a weird ending to that one. Yeah. He lost to Rockhold, and then I think he had one more loss. Oh yeah, to Romero, and then he bounced back and beat Kevin Gastelum in his last fight. So Weidman having a huge layoff, almost 16 months layoff. I think that'll play a factor in this one too. So what are you thinking in this matchup, Gary?
So I'm pretty confident in Jacare winning this matchup. I've always felt Chris Weidman, he's a great fighter, but I always felt like he was a top 5 fighter. I never thought he would crack the championship level. I do believe his first win against Anderson Silva, that was Anderson playing around a lot and he caught him. The second, I don't even know if that's a really solid win. It was an unfortunate injury. Followed by, who did he fight after? Was it
Machida?
Machida.
Yeah.
So Machida was a legitimate. I did not think he was going to beat Machida, so I was impressed with his win over Machida. But then he fought Vitor Belfort, and that's when he came off the juice, and he was just not the same kind of Vitor that was normally there. And then, he had those 3 rough losses. So I'm feeling pretty confident that Jacare is going to take this one. I do believe it will be a decision as well. Jacare is just a legend in the fight game, the jiu-jitsu game, and I feel like he's going to definitely have the W over Weidman. I think he's going to win like a unanimous decision over Weidman.
Yeah, and looking at some of these odds, there's money to be made on this fight right now. Fight goes the distance is at plus money. I think that's great value. I think Jacare by decision is over 5-1. There's just some lines that don't make sense. Jacare by submission is more likely than his decision. I really don't see him submitting a great wrestler like Weidman. Chris Weidman's TKO is plus 178. I don't see Weidman having the power to finish Jacare. So the lines are pretty off in this one, and the only chance I think that this fight has at ending inside the distance is I think Jacare has a chance at knocking him out. Man, I think we've seen how good and how powerful Jacare's striking is in that Derek Brunson fight, man. He's still got some pop in his hands, and he's still got power in his kicks too. And if Jacare has never really done too well at this at mixing up the takedowns and his striking, he either does one or the other. He plans to strike or he plans to take you down. But if he is able to shoot for a few takedowns and get Weidman thinking about his ground game, then I think that'll open up the striking, and then he could possibly score that knockout. But I believe this one will go to decision.
Great.
And in the main event, the ever so awaited UFC 230 main event, there was tons of speculation over what this was going to be. It could have been Dustin Poirier versus Nate Diaz, a great fight that was supposed to be on this card. It was rumored that it could be Sijara Eubanks versus Valentina Shevchenko. That John Jones news got announced right when this main event needed to be announced, and we thought John Jones could headline it. And out of all of those things, none of them ended up materializing. Tyron Woodley versus Colby Covington didn't happen. TJ Dillashaw versus Henry Cejudo, none of it happened. But instead, we got the Black Beast, Derek Lewis, taking on Daniel Cormier for the heavyweight championship of the world. I don't think anybody would have guessed this fight, with 1,000 guesses before it happened. The betting odds in this one opened up, as you'd expect, Daniel Cormier, a massive, massive favorite, at minus 800, while Derek Lewis is plus 575. People are, the line movement it has gone Derek Lewis's way. He's down to just a 5-1 underdog, while Cormier is the 7-1 favorite. The odds, speak for themselves in this one. It's a pretty big mismatch. I kind of like the fact that the UFC gave the title shot to Derek Lewis. He certainly earned it. He's, 9-1 in his past 10. He had that incredible comeback at UFC 229. That was probably the UFC's most watched card ever. So I completely understand the decision behind it. It's a little bit questionable considering that Derek Lewis was medically suspended until I believe November 8th or 10th. And then all of a sudden they need this main event, and then Nevada went back and they made his suspension to October 30th, making him eligible for this fight. So there's a little bit of manipulation and trickery going on. I think that Derek Lewis ate a lot of punches in that Alexander Volkov fight, and he's probably it's probably not healthy for him to be taking this fight. But regardless, they needed a main event, and this is certainly they're riding the popularity of Derek Lewis coming off that my balls was hot interview. So how do you think this fight plays out?
So I believe I don't really see a reality that Derek Lewis wins. Big Derek Lewis fan, it's pretty remarkable with someone with his skill set that he's been able to get a title shot. He's no high-level Muay Thai, he's no high-level Jiu-Jitsu. Like he said, he's a brawler. And for him to be a one-trick pony and get to a title shot, that's pretty impressive. So I don't want to count him out completely, but DC's the double champ for a reason. He's dominant. He's been in the Olympics. He's fought some of the greatest of all time. He's destroyed legends. I really believe that Derek Lewis doesn't have a big chance, but you can't count him out. He's got some crazy knockout power. We just see in his last fight, the last 10 seconds of the fight, he comes back and knocks him out. So, but I do believe DC will take him seriously. I don't think DC will sleep on him, but I do believe I could see DC winning with a submission in the second or third round.
Yeah, I think that's right around when it'll end too. Either a submission or some extremely dominant position like the mounted crucifix he got in the Volkan Ozdemir fight, or possibly just full mount, something like that, full back mount, and just pounding him out with strikes. I wouldn't put any money on anything in this fight. There is just too many variables. Daniel Cormier's hand is not at 100% allegedly. He said that he couldn't fight at the UFC 230 main event because his hand was hurting. And then a couple of weeks later, they offered him this fight. They must have offered him a bigger paycheck. And then he said, okay, I'll do it. Like I mentioned, Derek Lewis taking those, something like 70 strikes to the head on October 6th, and this fight goes down 28 days after that. So just not enough time for him to recover his cranium. So I think that this fight is, and like you said, there's just something about Derek Lewis that's peculiar. I saw some guy, he was advising everyone. He said, hey, I know Volkov should win this fight, but don't put your money on it. There's something about Derek Lewis. There's some entity that is guiding him to a title shot. There's something that makes him dig deep in the third round or the fifth round or whatever it is and come back and get that win after losing the entire fight. Very few guys can do that. And there's just something special about Derek Lewis. And even though this matchup is very, very unfavorable for him, it wouldn't be the craziest comeback of Derek Lewis's career. So Derek Lewis was an plus 863 in the third round against Volkov. So over an 8-1 underdog, and that didn't stop him now. So being a 5-1 underdog is nothing to Derek Lewis. So this card, it had a lot of injuries. It came together all right in the end. But that being said, I'm still looking forward to Saturday nights. Should be some good fights. There's probably a better undercard than main card in this one. But with that being said, we're gonna transition to a little jiu-jitsu conversation, because as I mentioned earlier, we were just finishing up jiu-jitsu class, and we're big fans of jiu-jitsu ourselves. So I have a few questions for Gary. Gary is a purple belt at Balance Studios, and so one of my first questions is, how long have you been doing jiu-jitsu, and have you been training at Balance the entire time?
So I started jiu-jitsu when I was 12 years old. Sorry. When I was 12 years old. So I've been doing it for coming up 13 years now. So thank you. So 13 years. I started at Bill Stevens Karate, which is in North Jersey, which is now Connected BJJ. I went to school in New York City for a little while, so I trained at a school called Square Circle Muay Thai. It was a Muay Thai school, but they did have a jiu-jitsu program there that I attended. And then once I moved to Philadelphia, I've been training at a school in the Northeast, but primarily Balance Studios. So 13 years, and I've been at Balance now for about 3 years.
Were you a green belt when you started as a teenager?
So I started as a white belt, and then I started so long ago, my instructor was only a brown belt. So we did the belts kind of like the karate way. So I started with a white belt, and I went to the yellow belt, and then an orange belt. And then a couple days after my 16th birthday, because you need to be at least 16 to get a blue belt, I got my blue belt. From there I went to college, so there was a in-between time where I wasn't really at a gym too long. But then I got my purple belt about a year and a half ago from Phil and Rick McGlery's.
Nice. So all together, if you had to consolidate the total time you've been training without breaks and everything, how long would you say about it?
The longest I ever took off was when I had a shoulder surgery. I tore my labrum in 2012. It was a jiu-jitsu related injury, of course. So I didn't train for about 6 months then. So that was the longest I haven't trained. Even when I was in college and I didn't necessarily have a school to train at, me and my buddy found a way. We found some mats in the gymnasium, and we would just roll around. So I've been consistently training for about coming up 13 years now.
Nice. So this next question might be a little bit hard for you to remember, but the question is, what is the biggest difference between your life before and after you started training?
So initially when I started training, I wasn't too great of an athlete, and I don't think I'm too great of an athlete now, but I do believe through jiu-jitsu, I learned just put in the hours and put in the hard work. It's a lot of just drilling and practicing and just showing up to class. So, I'd say I learned definitely how to be consistent. I learned how to, train hard. So my life before then, I didn't really know. I mean, it was so long ago. I was only 12. I didn't really know. All my friends were playing sports, hockey, baseball, football, and I didn't really have anything that I cared about too much until I started training jiu-jitsu. So I guess it gave me some sort of a direction, something I like to do.
Yeah, the benefits, you could go on forever and ever. Not only like personal qualities, but physical ones. Getting in shape. Learning respect, learning communication skills,
Totally.
teaching skills. You're trying to be a teacher yourself, and you're probably getting a ton of experience teaching in class. I even heard Joe Rogan talk about this on his podcast recently. He said, I had crazy anxiety, and I never spoke in front of people anymore, but I was good at martial arts, and then I started coaching martial arts, and all of a sudden I was good at speaking because I was teaching something I was confident in. So, like I said, it's 13 years ago. It's probably a little bit hard to remember what your life was like, but it just gives you a structure to your life. It's every night, 6 or 7 o'clock. I got something to do. I got one of the best environments in the world to go be around. And something special about jiu-jitsu is I think it's one of the few environments you go to when every single person there wants to be there. You go to a class, a job, a DMV, anywhere, majority of the people probably don't even want to be there, and that results in an environment where everyone's not talking or miserable or on their phones or head in a computer or something like that. But jiu-jitsu, everyone wants to be there to better themselves. It might be it's probably one of the best times of the day for everyone who's on the mat. So it's just just an incredible learning environment, and you just learn so much information and become friends with so many people. It's really an incredible thing that I wish I could recommend to more people.
Like all my friends train. Some of my best friends, I've choked them, so they've choked me. It's a very interesting relationship when you're with your jiu-jitsu buddies, because it's closer than a friendship, because you're trusting somebody that they won't break your arm or choke you out. So it builds a good bond. So I really appreciated that a lot about jiu-jitsu, just the camaraderie.
Yeah. I mean, I have a list on my phone of just 50, 60, 70 people I've met. I barely know, if I look at the list of the names, I barely know who a lot of them are. But just you meet just dozens and dozens of people a week that can become. You already have a huge thing in common with them, and all of a sudden, it's, oh, you watch UFC too. Oh, you watch Joe Rogan too. All of a sudden, you could talk about shit for hours.
Yeah.
So one thing that we talked about a few weeks ago on the mats, you said you had a few unique stories about having to utilize your jiu-jitsu in real life as as sort of a self-defense technique. And a lot in the beginner stages of jiu-jitsu, you're not learning crazy sport jiu-jitsu like barambolos or heel hooks or ashigarami or anything. You're learning how to defend from a sucker punch, how to defend from someone grabbing you behind or grabbing your collar or grabbing something like that. So the beginning stages of jiu-jitsu are super self-defense oriented, and so you've had some experience using some of those techniques. So tell us about some of those stories.
So there's been a couple of situations that I've had to use my jiu-jitsu. Being in a major city, going out with your friends, there's a lot of people are drunk. There's people are stupid. So there's been a couple of situations where I've had to use my jiu-jitsu. There's one situation where I was in upstate New York, and someone was trying to rob my friends and I. So I just quickly locked in like a rear naked choke, and you just put someone to sleep, and you just walk away. No harm, no foul. I put him to sleep. We walked away. I looked at him getting up. He looked around, and that was it. No one was hurt. Everything was fine. Sometimes when you're throwing punches, you could break your hand. You can get cut. But quick choke, and then it's just over. No harm, no foul. Then another situation I've been in, just using basic headlock defense. Someone would, or at a bar, and then someone, I was outside the bar, and someone just put me in a headlock for no reason really. So I just used, the Gracie 101 basic self-defense, and I was able to get out of the headlock and just get out of there, and everything was fine. So definitely the basics of jiu-jitsu at the beginning are very self-defense oriented, but it's extremely important. And I think some people are really into sport jiu-jitsu, and sport jiu-jitsu is very cool. I agree, Bramble is awesome. Heel hooks are sweet. Twister's really cool. But, the reason we have jiu-jitsu is for, self-defense, to protect the smaller person from someone larger. So I think that it's, a lot of self-defense in the beginning part, which is, I think is great.
After the dude headlocked you, did you let him go, or did you?
So from the headlock, I just it's like one of the first things you learn in Gracie 101, the headlock defense. So he threw me in a headlock. I sidestepped. I squatted down. I picked him up and just threw him on the ground. And that's all you need. I hopped in the cab and got away. There's no reason to continue there. I was out of the headlock, and he might be a little bruised up the next morning, but he was fine, and because of my jiu-jitsu, I understood the move in the situation, so I wasn't going to pick him up and throw him down as hard as I could. I don't want to seriously injure somebody. I just wanted to get out of the situation, so through my jiu-jitsu, I know my strength, I know my power, so I just did enough to get out of it and then just get out of the situation, which you always want from any self-defense situation.
Yeah, you could have hurt him a lot worse, for sure.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
You see a lot of people, they're in a street fight and they knock someone down and they just go up for a soccer kick to the face.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
I mean, that's just you're waiting for like a case to happen at that point.
Totally.
If someone attacks you, you quick drop them and walk away. Nothing bad's happening to you. But you go up and falcon punch someone when their face is already on the ground. You could be facing some criminal charges. I mean, you're probably gonna significantly injure the person too. So
totally.
like you said, know your strength. Your abilities. Just how hard to slam a person and get away. And then the rear naked choke. It was just standing. It wasn't.
It's just standing rear naked choke. If someone doesn't really know jiu-jitsu, it's very easy to hit any sort of move on them, and the rear naked choke is one of the easier moves to learn. But if you haven't trained a day in your life, you don't really know how to defend it. So it's very easy to hit on somebody who's unaware of the move itself.
Yeah, you can put someone out in 3-5 seconds. For
totally.
Sure. And if you're, it would probably be better to do it standing too, so you don't have to go on your back when you're on the ground and risk getting your back cut up on the gravel or by heroin needles in North Philadelphia or something like that.
Yeah.
But one thing you mentioned is we were talking about sport jiu-jitsu a little bit, and I know you're into watching professional jiu-jitsu. So we've seen a lot of new formats been coming out in professional jiu-jitsu in the past couple of years. Eddie Bravo has really popularized his EBI rules, which prevent boring matches. They prevent points, and they prevent ties. So instead, if a match goes the 10-minute time limit, then Eddie Bravo designed these special attack positions in overtime. So you're on the person's back, or you have them in an armbar, or you have them in mount, and all of a sudden, after that 10 minutes, it's not just a tie and both guys walk away with a tie, or one guy wins on points. You actually get to see this elimination style round. So that's been really popular. We've seen the rise of combat jiu-jitsu, another Eddie Bravo idea, I believe, and all different types of promotions. We have Kasai grappling coming out, and most newly was the Quintet competition. So out of all those that I mentioned, and maybe either other ones, ADCC or IBJJF, what are you thinking about like the future of sport jiu-jitsu, and what do you see in bright spots in jiu-jitsu right now?
So the Quintet was really cool. I was really looking forward to it. I heard about it on the Joe Rogan podcast. And then when I watched it on TV, it was really interesting. I was very fast-paced. I like how there wasn't necessarily weight classes. I enjoyed that there was, you had 4 or 5 guys on your team below X amount of weight, and then if you won the match, you continued. So I thought it was really exciting to watch. I love watching all sorts of jiu-jitsu competitions, but I do understand it's kind of boring to sometimes watch an IBJJF match, or even sometimes the Eddie Bravo's the EBI rules. Sometimes those matches can be boring for someone who doesn't necessarily watch combat sports. If you I don't really watch football, but when I watch a football game on TV, it's entertaining, it's fast paced, I can enjoy it. When I'm watching golf, I don't really understand the sport. It's not exciting to me. So I felt like that was a problem with a lot of jiu-jitsu tournaments before EBI came out. EBI made it a little more interesting, and I feel like there's a couple more tweaks now to make it like the quintet you said. I believe the quintet, in my opinion, I believe the quintet is the best format for a tournament currently. So I would like to see more quintet type tournaments, and I believe, and from other practitioners I've talked to, the quintet is potentially going to be like the main format, just because of how exciting it was. And I had people I was with that didn't even train, and they were able to enjoy it and watch it. So I think the quintet is going to be really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's a great sport for people who enjoy it, but I understand how it could be boring, especially when the people are the same weight or the same skill. It's there's a lot of stalemate matches where there's positions that are very, very complicated, and the average person just simply won't understand them. But when you add in this tournament, this team tournament, when you can potentially have a 145-pound guy going against a 210-pound guy, it adds that that little bit of a freak show aspect to it, like kind of like the original UFCs when the people were different weights and you see them compete and they win, and then you wait a little bit and you see them compete again. It really gets the excitement up. I am 100% sure the UFC would not have worked if there wasn't the same night tournament type of formatting to the event. The reason why those were so successful is because you saw Hoist win, and you saw him come out again and win, and you saw him come out again and win. So I really think that tournament style is just really genius. I hear Eddie talking about all the time how we can get jiu-jitsu on TV. He says there's fly fishing on TV, there's golf on TV, there's everything on TV. Why can't we have jiu-jitsu on TV? It's a good point. There is a lot of boring stuff on TV, but as far as getting jiu-jitsu on TV, I think it's going to be a tough task. I mean, even with the quintet and how exciting it is and all of the great things that it has going for it, I still think it's a little too complex for just the average person flipping through channels to understand. Unfortunately, there's a lot of morons out there watching NASCAR and the Real Housewives, but I just don't think the demand is going to be there for jiu-jitsu on television. But I mean, we have Flow Grappling. People are paying $30 a month to see that, to see jiu-jitsu and MMA and wrestling. They're paying for UFC Fight Pass to see these events like Quintet and BBI. So there's still a lot of money to be made in jiu-jitsu. Like we were rattling off promotions for Fight to Win and all these people. People are selling tickets. Jiu-jitsu is becoming really, really popular for in this niche group of people, and there's money to be made. So it's there's money to be made in tournaments and low level competitions, but unfortunately in the grand scheme of things, I do not see it ended up getting on ESPN or anything like that. But that doesn't mean this the sport is at a stalemate. It just necessarily means that they need to keep working with this niche group they have and keep doing creative ideas like they are doing currently. So one of my last questions was so if 100 people walk into a jiu-jitsu school, let's say they sign up, not just walk into, what percentage of them stop at white belt? What percentage of them get to blue belt, purple, and so forth?
So I'd say a majority of people, maybe half, will continue for white belt. I mean, some people just sign up for some basic self-defense, and after they learn it, that's all they need, and that's fine. You don't have to. It's each their own. Some people just do it for the workouts. They start getting in shape, makes them feel a little better, and then they fall off. So I'd say about 50% stick with the white belt. And then after that to the blue belt. Once people get blue belt, you start seeing people drop off all the time. It's like the blue belt curse. When one gets a blue belt, you never see them again. Because, you hit the first level, you've accomplished something, and then, you feel really good, but you're still so far from that ultimate goal. So after blue belt, I don't know, maybe you've lost that 50%, maybe you're going to lose another 25, so you're only down to 25%. And then when you get to purple, brown, and black, the numbers just start to fade, if you put in the hours to get to a purple belt and there's injuries, life gets in the way. But if you're really committed, you can definitely go on. But if I have to say the people that start from white belt to black belt all the way through, maybe it's 5%, maybe it's 4%. It's very, very small numbers, unfortunately.
Yeah, the blue belt blues, you mentioned that. I can't understand the mentality behind that. Someone who puts in 12 months, 18 months, 2 years into jiu-jitsu, they finally get this, this great accomplishment, and then all of a sudden they decide to stop showing up. It's just such a waste, I mean, if a person signs up for jiu-jitsu, they do a couple of classes, and then, it doesn't work with their schedule, or they didn't like it as much as they thought. I understand that, it's definitely not for everybody, but if you put in the work to get a blue belt and for some reason you just quit, man, that's some weak shit right there. But yeah, I mean, my estimations, I think might be even lower than yours.
Yeah,
maybe
I was being high.
I would say 20 out of 100 maybe get blue belt, and then maybe 10 get purple, maybe 5 get brown, and maybe 2 or 3 get black. Yeah. It's so it's if you wanna walk in and you have someone in a jiu-jitsu school and they're already thinking they want to be a black belt when they're a white belt, that person right there is worth investing their time, and that's worth giving a couple extra tips and philosophizing about jiu-jitsu, giving advice and everything like that, because if they have that hunger at such a young stage in their career, then that person that's what you need, man, because there's only one thing that will get you your black belt, and that is if you keep coming. If you come to jiu-jitsu 2,500 times, you're gonna get your black belt. It's just gonna happen. You're gonna get better, and it's unfortunate that so many people fall off. I mean, if the question goes, if 100 people walk into a school, how many of them sign up? I think it's maybe 50%, maybe less than 50%. I mean, a lot of people come into class and they hear about a self-defense class or something like that, and then they maybe do they try out 1 or 2 classes and they don't come back. Unfortunate, but jiu-jitsu in America is fairly expensive. I think that is definitely like a big aspect. People want to, I want to learn how to defend myself, I'll try out this school, and then they're like $100 and some dollars a month. Oh shit, my Planet Fitness costs $25. I think I'll just keep going there. So it's tough, but and then here comes my my last question. And what would be your ultimate jiu-jitsu and possibly like MMA goals? Because I know you mentioned that you competed in kickboxing a few times. So do you have any aspect or any aspiration to try amateur MMA at some point? And what are your goals for competing in jiu-jitsu, and your goals for just all throughout jiu-jitsu?
So I would definitely like to be able to make money off jiu-jitsu, whether that be competing or owning a gym at one point. I would really enjoy to make some money doing jiu-jitsu. Like you mentioned before, the fight to win. You don't make that much money, but it's cool to make money off something you enjoy. It's a cool feeling to, it's like you're a fighter. You're officially a fighter. You've got a paid check for competing. So I'd like to compete more. I'd like to eventually. I'd like to open a school. I do have interest in doing MMA, but I would like to get my black belt before I do MMA. I guess as an amateur black belt, it's not really that fair. But I just am more curious just to see how my jiu-jitsu will hold up against like a legitimate striker. I don't really have any interest of being a champion or pursuing this as a career. I just solely would like to have some MMA matches just to see how my jiu-jitsu stacks up against somebody who's trained. Like we mentioned before, I know how my jiu-jitsu stacks up to somebody in a self-defense situation, but I'm just curious for myself to see how jiu-jitsu would work against someone who legitimately knows striking. So yeah, I would like to have a couple amateur MMA fights, see how that goes. Obviously get my black belt, and then I'd like to compete in some tournaments for some money. So that would be the ideal situation for me.
Nice. Yeah, you mentioned like opening up a studio. I mean that we sitting at Balance Studios right now. We see the work of Phil and Ricardo Miglioris. The guys who just put in the hours grinding for the past few decades of their lives. But they competed hard, they trained hard, and now they're living large. They have they're obviously not living in luxury life. They're still in the gym all the time. They're still coaching all the time. They're still working hard and expanding Balance, but they put their hard work in the past is setting them up for the future, and that just seems like a dream, honestly. I guess we're sort of on the same page with hoping to open up a school in the future, and with you being probably one of the youngest teachers at Balance Studios, I mean, it seems like you already got a great start. Got your foot in the door, racking up experience, and then after all you need is a black belt, a little bit of experience, and you can open up your own school and start gaining a client base and making a living off of this passion that we've been having for so long. So you mentioned that you're going to be moving soon. You're going to be moving to Houston. Do you have any idea of what gym you're going to be training at?
So I have been looking at a couple gyms. There is a gym, Pablo Silva, which is in the Inner Loop in Houston. I think I'm going to be checking that out. He's a pretty accomplished grappler, and his school looks like the AOJ school, so that's pretty cool. And I think he's the featherweight black belt holder for the Fight to Win. So he's pretty talented. I've watched some of his videos, so I'm thinking there. But I got to try a couple things out. I wish there was a balance down there, but can't have everything.
Yeah, you'll probably have to go down and check out a few gyms, see what's the best fit, the best environment. Yeah. Make sure there's no crazy rules at any of them. Yeah. But well, it's been a pleasure talking to you, man. I wish you luck in the move. It's a damn shame that you're going to be leaving. We just started to become closer friends, and you just started to coaching a lot more consistently. So it's a shame that has to come to an end. But I'm sure that you're making the move for a better decision in your career and your life. So I wish you luck with that, and thanks for being on the podcast, man.
Totally, thanks a lot, man. It was a lot of fun.
All right, ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, aliens, Martians, any conscious being tuning into the podcast, I hope you enjoyed my talk with Gary. I hope you enjoyed the jiu-jitsu talk. If you are interested in hearing some more about jiu-jitsu, then just reach out to me on Twitter at UFOUFC. And thank you all for tuning into the podcast, and I will catch you guys next week. Peace.